Have you noticed that despite years of creative advice, productivity systems, and self-development work, true creative freedom still feels elusive? I see this paradox everywhere, myself included. Creators with impressive technical skills and extensive knowledge who still feel creatively trapped. Artists who have mastered their craft and still their work feels lifeless or mechanical, or there's something missing. Writers who know every structure about storytelling and still it feels like there's something missing in the process. Why is this happening? Why does acquiring more creative techniques, better equipment, or even more practicing hours so rarely deliver the freedom we are seeking? The answer lies in something more fundamental than skill or technique, something that is absolutely essential to understand. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Your individual consciousness exists as a dissociated alter of universal consciousness. In simpler terms, your individual mind is already a fragmentation of something larger. And when you experience inner conflicts between competing thoughts, motives, or identities, you create further dissociations in an already localized mind. You become a fragment of a fragment. This division manifests as the constant hum of psychological noise that accompanies most creative sessions. Self-doubt, comparison, fear of judgment, perfectionism, and the exhausting inner dialogue that drains your creative energy before it can find expression. This shows that we spend a lot of our energy in managing this internal resistance, which this energy is wasted instead of actually using that to create. The consequences are profound. Creatives can spend a lot of mental energy managing internal resistance rather than engaging in pure creation. More than half of your energy is consumed even before you start creating. But there is a way through this maze. Though it defies conventional wisdom about creativity and contradicts virtually everything we've been taught about self-development. What if the very pursuit of looking for better ways to improve our creativity is actually perpetuating this problem? What if the solution is not in adding more to what we already have, but in a fundamentally different way to seeing things? In this video, we'll be looking in how we can approach creativity apart from adding techniques or improving our skills. One based instead on choiceless awareness, a state of unfragmented consciousness that is the birthright of every creative being, but remains hidden beneath layers of psychological division. So before we begin the video, if you want to listen to my work, which is my music, you can click on the channel, and if you like the music that you find there, you can subscribe so that you'll get notified when I upload. So let's get into the video. Here's a trap most creators fall into. We sense a limitation in our creative expression and immediately look for a new technique, practice, or method to overcome it. We take another course, read another book, adopt another productivity system, and while these things might provide a temporary relief or incremental improvement, they never deliver lasting freedom. Why? Because every solution, every practice, routine, or time commitment merely arranges content within this divided awareness. The self, that seemingly solid entity you call the I, is not a fixed reality, but content in consciousness maintained through memory, identification, comparison, defense, and habit. It exists through the mind's process of revisiting past experiences, deriving identity from them, and projecting them to the future. This self inevitably creates conflict because desire and fear inevitably collide within its structure. Let's say you experience a an enjoyable creative session, and pleasure becomes the stored experience. But when that experience is over, it now only exists in the mind. The self, through thought, seeks to repeat this experience, creating dependence and fear of not getting or losing what was once pleasurable. The same happens with painful creative experiences. You try to suppress or reject the pain, but the very attention to it, even in rejection, keeps the suffering alive. When you reject it, it stays hidden, but it's still operative, like something swept under the carpet, but it's obviously still there. So this is how it might sound like. I had a creative breakthrough last week. Now I need to have another one. My last project failed. I need to make sure that doesn't happen again. Others are creating more interesting work. I need to catch up. All of these thoughts represent consciousness at war with itself, dividing experience to what should be pursued and what should be avoided. This is the crucial point most people miss. The weight of choosing, this movement of thought that divides experiences into acceptable and unacceptable, desirable and undesirable, implies duality. And this is a construct made and maintained by thought itself. The observer and the observed, the creator and the creation, the thinker and the thought. These are not separate entities, but it is a single movement that is artificially divided by thought itself. The observer that we believe is essential to the creative process is actually its fundamental limitation. But I need to evaluate my work. I need to make choices about what's working and what isn't. Consider this. When consciousness is unified, evaluation happens without the evaluator. Choices occur without the chooser. Action flows without the actor. This isn't mystical nonsense. It is what happens when consciousness is at unity with itself. It's the actual nature of consciousness that is not at war with itself. Think of those rare moments where you are really indulged into something that the self has disappeared and the mind is quiet. In those moments, was there a separate you making decisions, or did the work seem to unfold through you? Did time exist as a psychological burden, or did you emerge surprised of how much time has passed? Those weren't accidental states. That was consciousness acting as an integrated whole rather than as fragmented parts. They were moments when psychological freedom allowed creativity to flow without being impeded. This explains why no technique, practice, or method, no matter how sophisticated, can deliver lasting creative freedom. These approaches all are from and within a divided consciousness. They all assume a reality and necessity for there to be an observer who is standing apart from the creative act, manipulating it through learned techniques. The hard truth is neither psychological time nor layered techniques can resolve this conflict because they are functions of the same divided mind. The entity seeking improvement through technique is itself the source of division. The turning point of any creative life comes with the recognition that true freedom comes not through addition or effort, but through seeing without the chooser, through choiceless awareness. Not a method, not a practice, a direct thing. Here's the paradox at the start of creative freedom. Anything you do with intent to achieve choiceless awareness becomes another act of division, another trick of the self perpetuating its own existence through the back door of spiritual or creative practice. Psychological freedom and creative living only arise when all methods, practices, seeking and accumulation of time are seen for what they are, ways of perpetuating inner division. This is not a technique, this is not a practice. It cannot be developed through time or through effort. It is a direct seeing that happens or doesn't in this moment. The invitation is deceptively simple. Be aware of your inner state without naming, judging, fixing, or choosing. Watch as memories arise during creation. Notice desires forming to impress others, to outdo yourself, and to avoid failure. Observe fears emerging of inadequacy, of rejection, of wasted effort. See comparisons happening between your work and others, between what is and what should be. Watch all this without trying to modify it, without labeling it as good or bad, without attempting to suppress what you don't like or extend what you do like. Here's my personal experience of this. For years, I thought freedom meant finding the right technique to silence my inner critic. Then I realized the critic isn't separate from me, and silencing it only creates another layer of conflict. When I simply observed the whole movement of criticism without trying to change it, something unexpected happened. The criticism continued, but it no longer had power. I could see it was just thought doing what thought does: dividing, comparing, judging. In seeing this completely, action flowed not from opposition to the critic, but from awareness itself. This awareness itself acts. Action flows directly from unconditioned seeing. The difficulty is we have been conditioned to see that awareness is something that is passive and action is something that is active. But this is another false duality created by thought. Awareness is intensely active, not as doing, but as a clarity that contains its own intelligence and movement. Here's an example. When you see a danger clearly, let's say a car speeding towards you, is there a gap between the seeing and the action of jumping aside? Or does the clarity of perception contain the action within it? For me, the way I see it, creative freedom works the same way. When consciousness perceives its own divisions clearly, without the interference of the fixer or the controller, that very perception begins to dissolve the division, not as an achievement of the self, but as a natural movement of this unified awareness. As you explore this direct awareness, watch closely for the mind's subtle urge to turn even awareness to a practice or a method. This is what it might say: I'll set aside 15 minutes each day to practice choiceless awareness. I'll use this 4-step process to develop better awareness. After 6 months of this awareness practice, I should see results. All of these thoughts represent the self co-opting awareness into its structure, turning the sword that will dissolve it into another tool for its continuation. True seeing cannot be systemized, repeated, or even taught. It happens now in the fullness of attention that is neither trained nor cultivated, but simply present. Personally, I realized I have a black belt in spiritual bypassing. I had turned awareness into another achievement, another thing to get good at, another way to eventually improve my creative output. The breakthrough came when I saw this whole pattern at once, not as something to fix, but simply as the movement of thought trying to secure itself. In that seeing, the pattern began to lose its grip. Not because I did anything about it, but because clear seeing is itself transformative. So, the invitation deepens. No next step, no future achievement, no psychological time. This is perhaps very challenging to communicate because the conditioned mind will immediately ask, how do I get there? What's the process? How long will it take? These questions all emerge from the self-seeking continuity and improvement through time. They all reinforce the very division they are supposed to heal. Movement from this choiceless awareness is spontaneous, integral, and creative. It is no longer reactive or driven by division. Creative action arises naturally when the mind is not at war with itself and not seeking results separated from the action itself. For me, I spent my past few years trying to get better through more knowledge, more practice, more techniques. I improved technically, but something vital was missing. Then I glimpsed what was happening. I was always creating from division between what I was and what I should be, between the music I made and the music I thought I should make. When I saw this pattern completely, something shifted. Now, strange as it sounds, music plays through me rather than by me. I still practice, still learn, but it's no longer driven by the conflict of becoming. It flows from being fully present with what is. When consciousness is no longer fragmented by the movement of thought, by memory, identification, comparison, defense, and habit. Creativity flows not by something that you do, but as something that you are. This is what every creator truly seeks beneath the surface desires for recognition, impact, or expression. We seek the wholeness that exists when the divided self no longer fragments consciousness, when we create from unity rather than from division. Real psychological freedom is not the result of time, accumulation, or a method, only of the ending of the self's compulsive movement by seeing it clearly as it is. Can you right now see the whole movement of your thoughts without choosing, without motive, without division? That is creative living. That is psychological freedom. That is the most valuable skill for any creator. Though to call it skill is already to divide something that can't be divided, but we go on. In this seeing lies the transformation that technique cannot deliver. From fragmented creating to living creativity. Not as something to be achieved, but something that is there from an undivided consciousness. The most profound creative insights throughout history have emerged not from the accumulation of technique, but from moments when the divided self temporarily dissolved, allowing direct access to the universal creative intelligence of which we are localized expressions. Psychological freedom is not something that you attain, but something that you discover is already present. When the obstacles to its recognition, all forms of inner division, are clearly seen for what they are. This seeing is available now, in this moment, not as a future achievement, but as the ever-present reality beneath the noise of consciousness at war with itself. This is my first video. I'm really excited for this YouTube journey. I've really had fun doing research and writing the script for this YouTube video. I hope you enjoyed. You can subscribe to be tuned in for more stuff that I'll post, and see you next time.